Good morning, students. Today I want to give a brief introduction about the nervous system. We studied about why we are doing a neurological examination, how we do a neurological examination, and what are the things we check for, like what problems can happen in the brain, what problems can happen in the spinal nerves, what problems can happen in the cranial nerves. Okay, so here we are going to study the basic things. This actually is something that you would have studied in your first year in nervous system and also neuroanatomy, but I will go over a little in detail in certain aspects which is relevant for you, because if you understand the neuroanatomy, then it's easy for you to understand what diseases can occur, where they occur. Okay, so that's why that's why we are going to go over the nervous system again. See, nervous system, the basic unit of the nervous system is the neuron. We'll be seeing the picture of the neuron later on. You would have drawn neurons in the first year as part of your course and seen how the neuron is. So that's the basic part of the nervous system. Okay, there are millions of neurons in the human body, both in the brain and the peripheral nervous system. So some parts of this slides I will skip because I have already taken some aspects previously. So let's start off with the nervous system. See, this is the brain and the spinal cord, which form the central nervous system. So the brain is here inside the head, and the spinal cord, which is a central part, which ends here. Okay, and the cauda equina starts from the spinal cord. So the central, the orange part, which is the spinal cord, so only that forms the central nervous system, and all other neurons outside the CNS, that is the 31 pairs of spinal nerves and the 12 pairs of cranial nerves, they all form the peripheral nervous system. So from the spinal cord, all the peripheral nerves you can see, they are starting. So they are peripheral nerves, and this is the cauda equina. Why is it called cauda equina? Cauda means tail, equina means horse. So it looks like a horse's tail, as these are the nerves which start from the spine. So that's why they are called cauda equina, and these are all peripheral nerves. Okay, spinal nerves, that are 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and the cranial nerves start from the cranial part and then supply to the face, mouth, tongue, deltoid, and all these areas. So they are called cranial nerves, but they are peripheral nerves. Only the cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem, and the spinal cord form the central nervous system. The brain has three major parts: the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brainstem. The cerebrum part forms the telencephalon, diencephalon. Brainstem has midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata as its parts. Okay, so this is the telencephalon. Okay, and this is the diencephalon, and the midbrain, pons. Okay, cerebellum is present here, and the medulla oblongata is present here. Okay, spinal cord starts from the medulla oblongata. This is the central nervous system, brain. Okay, so the cerebrum, the cerebral cortex, contains of four areas or four major lobes: the parietal lobe, frontal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe, as you can see in the picture. Okay, frontal, as the name indicates, is in the front, the parietal, temporal, and the occipital at the back. What are the functions of the cerebral cortex? I have been repeating. One is the thought, intelligence, then the motor, the muscle, whatever actions you do, they are all controlled by the cerebral cortex. Okay, so when you want to move your right hand or left hand, right leg, left leg, your fingers, your thumb, whatever movements you want to do, it starts in the cerebral cortex. So in some patients, when the cerebrum is damaged, we saw what is ischemia, what is hemorrhage. So when ischemia, hemorrhage occurs in the brain, what happens is some parts of the brain get damaged. So based on the area which is damaged, the functions get affected in the human body. Okay, the diencephalon contains the thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus relays stimuli from all sensory neurons to cortex for interpretation. This means sensory neurons start from the periphery. I already told you that our sensation, these sensory neurons, they start from the periphery and come to the brain. So they bring signals from the periphery. If somebody touches you or if you touch a hot object, so the stimuli come from the sensory neurons to the cortex. There it is interpreted. So the brain interprets whether it is a heat, whether it is pain, whether it is pressure, and then it relays signal to take further actions. Okay. Then the hypothalamus, it controls various things like temperature, blood glucose levels, hormone levels. So when the hypothalamus gets affected, either due to a cancer or due to any other problem, then these can be affected. Okay. So hypothalamus also maintains homeostasis, and it, just like we said, it releases the hormones. So this is similar picture. So then we come to the cerebellum. Cerebellum is located behind the brainstem. Okay. It helps monitor and regulate movement. It also maintains the posture, sense of equilibrium or stability, the speed. Okay. So as I said previously in one of the classes, when your cerebellum gets affected, you get something called disequilibrium. So people will stagger, they will have abnormal gait, they cannot walk in a steady fashion. Okay, that's one problem that can occur. Then they will not be able to identify the speed, and the fine movements will be affected. So when you tell them to hold a fingertip and touch the nose, they will, if suppose the C is the nose, they will do like this, they will do like this, they will do like this. So they cannot touch the nose. If you and me are told to touch the nose, we'll go and straight touch the nose, but they will not be able to do. So all this is because of cerebellar problems. So when there is cancer of the cerebellum, or if it is damaged because of any accident, then these problems can occur. Finally, we come to the brainstem. It contains of the pons, medulla oblongata, and midbrain. So these control the various breathing centers and other centers. That is why person who has injury to the brainstem, they become in a persistent vegetative state, and they also control the reflexes. Again, brainstem, the picture you can see. Spinal cord, we have not studied this in detail in the previous classes. It contains both gray matter and white matter. The gray matter in the spinal cord, this is a cross section of the spinal cord. If you cut the spinal cord, okay, but in reality, if anybody's spinal cord is cut, that's the end of their ability to move the parts of their body below the spinal cord level. Okay, suppose the spinal cord is injured at the cervical level, okay, at the neck level, the cervical vertebrae are at the neck. So any person who has injury of the spinal cord, okay, remember there are different things. Spine is the bone, okay, spinal cord is a central nervous system part which is protected by the spinal column. So the spinal cord, which is the very sensitive organ which is present in between the vertebrae, and that is damaged, any part below that gets affected and the person will not be able to move it. So as I said, when the damage occurs in the neck, then the person will have something called as quadriplegia. Plegia means paralysis, quadri means 4. So that means quadriplegia means both their hands and both their legs are paralyzed completely. Okay, suppose they get injury of the spinal cord at the lower level, lumbar level, or any other that area, then they will have paraplegia. That is, both their legs will get paralyzed, they will not be able to move it. So spinal cord is very important. Any damage can cause serious problems. So it contains both gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is the H-shaped part which is present in the cord. So this, you can see, this is the H-shaped part. Okay, that's the gray matter. You can see the color differentiation, gray matter and the white matter. The central part is a central canal, and this part is the anterior column, and that is the posterior column. So anterior horn cell, posterior horn cell is present here. So they are also very important because they do have a lot of functions which we'll see later. So what are the gray matter? The region of brain and spinal cord make up of cell bodies and dendrites of nerve cells. Okay, interneurons are also present, and then terminal portions of axons. We will see the axon and the neurons separately. So white matter, this part, the white matter, it contains tracts or pathways made up of myelinated nerves. So these pathways are from they go up to the brain. There are several pathways which are there. Some are called ascending pathways, some are descending pathways. As the name indicates, ascending pathways means they go up from the periphery. So they carry information from the sensory receptors on various parts of a body, and they take these information through the dorsal root to the thalamus, to the cerebral cortex. So you understand, from the periphery, from your legs, hands and other parts of the body, these sensory receptors go to the spinal cord, and through the spinal cord, through the tracts, they send information to the thalamus and to the cerebral cortex. On the other hand, the pyramidal tracts, they transmit impulses downward, okay, and they control the motor neurons and the muscles. Okay, the pyramidal tract controls the muscles. So any movement in your hand and leg, it is controlled through that's why when the spinal cord is damaged, the muscles cannot be controlled and they become paralyzed. Okay. Similarly, extrapyramidal tracts, they maintain the posture of the human body. So here you can see the tracts, okay, nerve fiber tracts. So here this is how they go from the bottom to the cerebral cortex. And this is the white matter, this is the gray matter and the central canal, and these are the sensory nerve root and spinal nerves. The spinal nerves from the spinal cord, and these are peripheral nerves, whereas this is the central nervous system. Okay, so here you can see the various tracts. One is the corticospinal tract, the rubrospinal tract, then these are pyramidal tracts. Okay, corticospinal, rubrospinal are pyramidal tracts. Extrapyramidal tracts are the medullary, vestibulospinal, tectospinal, pontine. Okay, they are all descending tracts. Okay, descending means they come from the brain to the periphery. Ascending means from the periphery to the brain. So the sensory nerve roots brings information which is carried by the ascending tracts to the brain. Okay, I hope you understand. It's a simple concept if you understand it. Okay, again here we have the picture of the ventral root and the dorsal root, dorsal ventral. Okay, and how they send information to the muscle fibers, and here how the muscle impulse comes from the spinal cord to the periphery, and from the periphery how the information goes to the brain through this. Okay, this arrow shows how the sensory information is brought from the periphery to the spinal cord and taken to the brain, whereas here we bring the information from the brain to the periphery through this impulse, and it goes to the muscle fibers. So this impulse is the same as this impulse. It goes to the muscle fibers, and here we have the neuromuscular junction. We'll be studying about neuromuscular junction in detail. It is a junction where the neuron meets the muscle, okay, muscle spindle. So from the brain, information is brought through the spinal cord, through the spinal nerve, the information is passed on to the muscle, and then the muscle, when it contracts, it will be able to do a movement in your body. Okay, so here we see the peripheral nervous system, which I have already explained. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves and 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Okay, what is the somatic nervous system? Somatic nervous system is nothing but sensation is carried from the periphery to the spinal cord. So what are the types of sensation? We have pain sensation, temperature sensation, touch sensation. Okay, these are the common things that we feel in our daily life. When you touch a hot object, you feel temperature. When you put your hand inside the freezer of your fridge, you feel cold, that's temperature. If somebody touches you, that is touch. If somebody pinches you, that is pain. Then you also feel proprioceptive sensation, and somatic or motor efferent nerves communicate from the spinal cord to the skeletal muscle. Okay, in this picture you can see the cross section of the spinal cord. This is the front, this is the back. So back means dorsal nerve, front means ventral nerve or anterior. In the posterior horn cell, what happens is the information comes from the periphery, goes to the spinal cord, goes to the brain. And at the anterior horn cell, the information comes from the brain to the horn cell, and then it goes to the muscles. The autonomic nervous system contains of sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. Okay, sympathetic is responsible for increasing activity in most of the system. Okay, so sympathetic system increases activity, like it releases epinephrine. Okay, there are things like when you are scared, what happens? Your heart starts beating faster. If a murderer is coming behind you, what will you do? You'll start running. So all that is formed with this system. Okay, your activity increases. Parasympathetic activity decreases your system's cholinergic fibers, which release acetylcholine. They reduce the activity. So here is the sympathetic system, here is the parasympathetic system. So you can actually have a look at the picture and see what happens. So in the sympathetic effects are increasing blood flow, increasing sweating, increasing your heart contraction rate. All this are connected by the sympathetic system. Okay, your blood pressure increases, your airways increase, all that the sympathetic system. And parasympathetic, on the other hand, it decreases blood flow. It has an opposite effect. See, the reflex we have already seen. There are various reflexes we saw in the nervous system examination about the various reflexes, Babinski sign, knee-jerk response, and all that thing. So we'll see how this reflex works. Monosynaptic means there is only one synapse, one nerve joining to another nerve, only one joining area. Okay, here the tendon is excited through the patellar tendon is hit by the knee hammer. So what happens is the information goes from the area where you hit the patella. It is taken through this muscle and it goes through the sensory neuron and goes and joins here, and then this is the synapse or the place where two neurons join, and here the next neuron starts and brings, and it gives a movement, which is the leg extension. So this is the knee jerk response, and it's a monosynaptic reflex. There is only one synapse here. You can see the green thing forming, joining the red thing. This is one nerve, that is one nerve. So this is the synapse, as we can see here. Then a complex reflex has multiple synapses. See, here you have two areas where it is joined. So that is multiple synapse. So what is a motor unit? A motor unit is nothing but all the muscle fibers which a neuron innervates. Okay, a single motor neuron and all the muscle fiber that it innervates together, it is called as the motor unit. Okay, one neuron and all the muscles that the neuron innervates or it supplies, that is called motor unit. So motor always refers to muscle. So when this nerve gets excited, it moves that particular muscle fiber. So all the muscle fibers that are moved by that particular nerve and the muscle fiber together, they form the motor unit. So neurons, this is what you studied in the first year. Neuron is the basic part of the nervous system. There are two types of neurons, motor neuron, sensory neuron, and a neuron has three parts: axon, dendrite, and soma. Okay, this is the axon, okay, and these are the dendrites and the soma or the cell body. Okay, this is a cell body which is present here. So it has three parts. So sensory nerves we have already seen. I'm not going to go in detail. Motor nerves, again, it's the same thing. So the axons carry impulses away from the cell body. Okay, so this is the axon. This is the cell body. So axons carry information away from the cell body, and through the dendrites it passes on the information to the next neuron through the synapse. Okay, and if you see this neuron, it is covered by this myelin sheath. This covering is called as the myelin sheath, and in between two myelin sheath there are areas of empty areas. It's called the node of Ranvier. These are all important because there are diseases where the myelin sheath is gone. Those diseases are called demyelinating disease. If the nerves do not supply the muscle, then it causes muscle paralysis. So each part of this anatomy is important because anything that doesn't work can cause a disease. So the nodes of Ranvier are present in between the Schwann cells, and they conduct impulses by jumping from one node to node, and that's called saltatory conduction. If you get a question called what is saltatory conduction, it's because of the impulse jumping from one node to another node through the nodes of Ranvier. Okay, instead of passing directly, it jumps from one node to another, and that is how the information is conducted. Okay, so this is how the action potential works. Okay, here you can see the nervous tissue, and the nodes of Ranvier are present here. Okay, and how the information is passed, how the conduction of an impulse goes. Okay, what is an impulse? A pain is an impulse, a touch is an impulse. So this information is carried from the periphery to the brain. Okay, so how does that information go? That is what we are going to study here. So the dendrites receive stimuli and carry it to the cell body, and cell body is the site of the cellular activity. So synapse, as I said, is the junction between the dendrite of one neuron and the axon of a second neuron. Let's see if there are, okay. This is the axon of one neuron. This is the dendrite of another neuron. So this is the synapse, picture of the synapse. Together, the dendrite of one neuron, axon of another neuron. If you want to see it in a proper neuron, here. So this is the dendrite of one neuron. It joins the axon of the other neuron. So this is the axon, cell body, and the dendrite. So this dendrite joins the axon of another nerve. So this part and the area dendrite this is the dendrite of this nerve, and the axon which joins this dendrite is called as the synapse. Okay, junction between the dendrite of one neuron and the axon of a second neuron. Nerves communicate by releasing chemical messengers at synapse. These chemical messengers are called neurotransmitters, which we will again see in one or two slides. Okay, the chemicals which are released at the synapse is called neurotransmitters. So here is dendrite of one neuron, here is the axon of the other neuron. So the information is passed on from the dendrite to the axon. So here you can see neurotransmitters which are attached to the receptor. They are released. Okay, and here actually the neurotransmitters are released and they join here. Okay, so this information comes from here, from the axon towards this dendrite, and from this dendrite the information is carried on to the axon of this nerve, and then it keeps going like that. So that is how information is passed. Axon brings neurotransmitters, they are released here, they attach to the receptors on the next nerve, and then they carry on. Okay, examples of neurotransmitters are monoamines, neuropeptides, nitric oxide. There are many neurotransmitters. Okay, we'll see few more later. So what are neurotransmitters? They are substances which neurons use to communicate with one another with the target tissues in the process of synaptic transmission. So this is synaptic transmission. Transmission happens in the synapse. That's why it's called synaptic transmission. These substances, neurotransmitters, they communicate with one another and with the target tissue, and that is how transmission of the impulses happen. I've been telling you from day one about how information goes through the nerves. So this is the method in which the information goes through the nerves. So this is the basic anatomy and physiology. So let us see what is excitatory and inhibitory function of the neurotransmitters. We have already seen about the neurotransmitters. What are the neurotransmitters? They are chemical substances which send information from one nerve to another nerve. So if these neurotransmitters send information actively, they are called excitatory neurotransmitter function. They send or they activate the receptors and they send information. Whereas the opposite, some neurotransmitters, what they do, they prevent action potential. Okay, they prevent the information from being sent. So that is inhibitory neurotransmitter. They prevent the information from being sent. Based on the chemical structure also, like you would have studied in biochemistry in first year about amino acids, monoamines, catecholamines. So these are all different neurotransmitters which can be classified based on the chemical structure. GABA, glutamate are amino acids, serotonin and histamine are monoamines, and dopamine, norepinephrine and epinephrine are catecholamines. These are all different types of neurotransmitters. Dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, serotonin, histamine, GABA, glutamate, all these are also neurotransmitters. But what we are saying here is based on their chemical structures, we can divide them into these categories also. Okay, so with this I think we'll finish this class. I'll continue in the next class about the remaining part of the nervous system, neuroanatomy.